Welcome back to Too Long to Read, the European Policy Centre's video explainer series on key enlargement issues. In our last episode, we looked at the long-standing challenges in normalizing relations between Belgrade and Pristina. Today, we turn to something equally pressing: the shadow of Moscow. How firm is Russia's grip on EU candidate countries? Where is it slipping? Where is it still holding tight? And what does that mean for the future of enlargement? Let's start with the basics. It's easy to talk about influence or soft power, but how do we actually measure them? That's where the Invigorate EU External Influence Index comes in. Developed under the Horizon-funded Invigorate EU project, it is the first systematic tool for mapping Russia's leverage across 9 EU candidate countries, from Albania all the way to Ukraine. The index captures 3 dimensions of influence: political, economic, and societal. If you'd like to know more about the full methodology, you can find it in the publication linked in the description. So, what does the index actually show? Over the past decade, Russia's influence in EU candidates has been on the decline overall, but not evenly and not everywhere. The heat map on your screen shows a steady drop in the political and economic dimensions, while the societal sphere remains more resistant. And in the graph, you can see that countries such as Moldova, Serbia, and Georgia are still more vulnerable to Russian influence. Let's take a closer look at the data. First, politically, Moscow has suffered some of its biggest setbacks. As you can see in the graph, the political influence scores have been declining across almost all candidate countries. Efforts to destabilize pro-European governments, meddle in elections, and back pro-Russian parties have often backfired. In Montenegro, the attempted coup in 2016 only accelerated the country's NATO accession. In Moldova, openly pro-Russian parties that once played a decisive role were banned in 2023. Even in Serbia, long seen as Russia's closest partner, the official political climate is shifting. Despite a formal strategic partnership and the absence of economic sanctions towards Moscow, Belgrade has supplied arms to Ukraine and signaled that betting on Russia is increasingly costly. Across the region, it is no longer politically profitable to be close to Moscow. Second, economically, the Russian bear has lost much of its bite. The graph illustrates a marked decline in dependence on Russian gas and trade between 2013 and 2023. Serbia connected to a gas interconnector with Bulgaria, opening access to non-Russian supplies. Ukraine has reoriented its entire trade system towards the EU, while Moldova stopped importing Russian natural gas altogether, switching to European suppliers. Across the region, sanctions, new pipelines, and shifting investment flows have steadily blunted the energy weapon that for decades defined Russia's influence. Third, as seen in the graph, Russia has proven far more resilient in the societal dimension. The paradox is this: the weaker Moscow becomes politically and economically, the harder it leans into society. Russian TV channels and online portals continue to shape narratives in Serbia and Republika Srpska. The Orthodox Church and conservative movements transmit Moscow's worldview, while conspiracy theories and anti-Western storylines circulate online. This is the last refuge of the Russian bear. When it can no longer sell gas or buy politicians, it turns to capturing imaginations. That covers the political, economic, and societal side. Now let's step back and look at 2 broader dynamics that shape Moscow's role. First, there is a clear geographical divide. Russia operates across 2 very different theaters. In the Eastern Trio, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, its ambitions are rooted in dominance. Moscow relies on historical ties, linguistic proximity, and unresolved conflicts like Crimea, Donbas, and Transnistria. These function as control mechanisms in enabling Russia to destabilize governments and install political proxies. In the Western Balkans, by contrast, there are no Russia's territorial claims and no direct military threat. Here, the ambition is to disrupt, exploiting corrupt individuals, fueling ethno-nationalist tensions and amplifying anti-NATO narratives. The second key dynamic, EU enlargement, is the best antidote to Russian leverage. The evidence shows a clear trend. Countries advancing on their accession path, diversifying energy and strengthening institutions steadily move away from Moscow's orbit. By contrast, fragmentation in Bosnia and Herzegovina or deliberate ambiguity in Georgia and Serbia leaves the door open for Moscow to sustain or even expand its role. In short, the closer to Brussels, the further from Moscow. Why are these insights important for the EU? Because influence is not just about today, it's about trajectory. Russia is losing its grip on elites and trade, but the narratives it has planted in societies don't vanish overnight. A well-timed disinformation campaign can still sway elections, stall reforms, or deepen divides. If the EU leaves a vacuum, Moscow will fill it. For that reason, our study points to three priorities. First, merit-based gradual integration. Conditionally open the doors of EU institutions to candidate countries while also expanding funding in the next financial cycle. Second, energy resilience. Every kilowatt less from Russia is one level less in Moscow's hands. Third, societal resilience. Support independent media, fact-checking and communication in local languages. If Russian narratives can spread in Serbian or Georgian, so should European ones. So here is the bottom line. Russia's influence in EU candidate countries is declining, but it is not disappearing. It is shifting from parliaments to people, from contracts to culture. The question is no longer whether Russia will try to meddle. It's whether the EU will act strongly enough to ensure those efforts fail. Can the EU afford to wait? Or will waiting only give the Russian bear more time to dig its claws into societies at the Union's doorstep? If you want to dive deeper into the numbers, country scores, and methodology, follow the link in the description and download the full publication. Thanks for watching. This was Too Long to Read, your shortcut to understanding EU enlargement.